A video shows up in your feed. It's the middle of a Thursday afternoon, and this person, 38 years old, is just out walking a dog through the park at 2 o'clock, picking up dry cleaning on what should be a lunch break, except there's no job waiting for them to get back to. The caption is always some version of the same sentence: I don't work anymore. Your first thought isn't envy, it's arithmetic. Because you know what your own rent costs, you know your own grocery total, and there's a good chance you're picturing this person earning something way above your own paycheck to pull this off. Here's the detail that usually gets left out. A lot of people living this aren't high earners at all. Plenty of them got there on something like $75,000 a year, which sits closer to the mid 50,000s, but nowhere near the six-figure salaries most early retirement stories get built around. This isn't really a question about luck. It's a question about what they actually did with a paycheck a lot of us already have. Here's the honest answer. All of this runs on something called fire, and what that actually means is coming up in just a moment. Nothing about it requires a rare salary. What changes the outcome is how hard you're willing to lean on it and what you're willing to give up to lean harder. So this isn't going to be a list of 10 different tricks. It's three. Same $75,000 salary, three different approaches, starting from the most realistic and ending at the most extreme. One that barely changes your life at all, and one that changes almost everything about how you spend. For each one, you'll see exactly what it takes and what it costs. First, though, what's this actually called and what does it mean? So what does FIRE actually mean? It stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. At its simplest, it means saving and investing enough that working stops being a requirement for you and starts being a choice. One more thing before any numbers show up. Everything from here forward is an illustration, not a promise. What actually happens depends on your real taxes, your real age, your real debt, and what the market genuinely does over the decades ahead, none of which anyone can predict with certainty. Here's what a lot of people get wrong about that definition, though. FIRE doesn't have to mean quitting at 35 and never earning another dollar again. The real goal was never sitting on a couch doing nothing. It's control over your time. Maybe that means leaving a job that's making you sick. Maybe it means weekday mornings with your kids instead of finding out at 67 that those mornings are already gone. Or maybe it just means enough security to finally start something of your own without needing it to cover rent by month 3. Hold on to whichever reason actually applies to you. It's going to matter later when it's time to pick which of these three fits. Before any formula, before any number, here's the one foundation none of this works without: an emergency fund already set aside and any high interest debt, credit cards, that kind of thing already paid off. This isn't optional and it isn't a nice to have. Skip it and nothing ahead holds up. An emergency that forces you to sell investments early or debt quietly costing more in interest than your money earns in the market undoes every single timeline in this video. Now that you have your solid foundation, here's the formula almost every strategy in this space is built on. Decide what you want to live on every year once work is optional, then multiply that annual number by 25. The result is your target portfolio. Every figure ahead is stated in today's dollars. You've probably heard the stock market averages around 10% a year. That number's real, but it's before inflation. Strip out the roughly 3% inflation has averaged over the long run, and you land closer to 7% after inflation, which is the number these timelines actually use. Now let's put your actual numbers behind that formula. Let's say you're 30 years old, earning $75,000 a year. That salary won't change across any of the three plans ahead. After federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare, that comes out to roughly $61,600 a year in actual take-home pay, a little over $5,100 a month landing in your account. And to keep the math clean, let's say you're starting from zero saved so far. Every number ahead builds from right here. One thing is identical across all three strategies. If your employer offers a 401k match, that gets captured first, no matter which of these three you choose. It's free money, and missing it is one of the most common mistakes people make before they've even started. First, the 401k up to that match. Second, a Roth IRA maxed out $7,500 for the year as of 2026. Third, back to the 401k up to its own limit, $24,500 for the year. Anything left after that goes into a regular taxable brokerage account, which has no cap at all. And when we say money gets invested, we mean the boring version. Low cost index funds, not picking stocks or trying to time anything. That part stays the same across all three. What changes is how much is moving through it and how much spills into that last account. Let's start with the one that demands the least from you. Slow fire gets its name from the pace, not the effort. It's called slow because nothing here is compressed, no aggressive sacrifice, no dramatic lifestyle cut. You just let time do most of the work. Here's the roadmap in one line. This version takes you from spending $48,000 a year right now to retiring at 59 with $1,200,000, spending that same $48,000 a year the whole way through, before and after. Here's the first question, and it's the same one for all three. What do you want your retirement to actually look like? Here's a useful anchor before we answer that. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the average single person in America actually spends about $48,800 a year. So let's use almost exactly that as your number, $48,000 a year, both while you're working toward this and once you've retired. Using the formula from a moment ago, $48,000 times 25, that's a target of $1,200,000. Second question, what would you need to spend right now while you're still working to get there at this pace? The answer is the same, $48,000. Rent, groceries, the occasional trip, dinner out without guilt attached to it. On $61,600 of take-home pay, that leaves roughly $13,600 a year to invest. In practice, that $13,600 comfortably fills a maxed Roth IRA, with the remainder going into your 401k, including whatever slice of it is needed to capture the full employer match. No need to touch a taxable brokerage account at all yet. Left alone in the market for around 29 years, that habit grows into your $1,200,000. 29 years from 30 puts you retiring at 59, 8 years ahead of the standard retirement age of 67. Meaningfully earlier, not dramatically earlier. And here's the part worth sitting with. Nothing had to change to get here. The vacation still happens. Dinner out still happens. The weekend still looks like a weekend. Here's the catch nobody warns you about, because nothing about this feels urgent. Nothing stops that automated amount from quietly shrinking on you. A raise shows up, and it can go one of two ways. Either your contribution goes up with it, or the raise gets absorbed into a nicer car, a bigger place, a few new recurring charges, and the number you started with slowly becomes a memory. Picture two people starting this at the exact same time, same salary, same $13,600 plan. 5 years in, both get a similar raise. One bumps the automated contribution to match it. The other lets the raise quietly become a nicer lease and a slightly bigger apartment. And over the following years, those new recurring costs start eating into the original contribution itself, not just the raise. A decade later, the first person is still tracking toward 59, right on schedule. The second one, now contributing closer to $11,000 a year instead of $13,600, checks the numbers and finds themselves looking at 62 instead. Not because of one dramatic decision, just because the number they started with slowly stopped being protected. The market doesn't send you a warning when that happens. It just shows up 11 years in, when your account balance is a lot smaller than the plan said it would be. None of this means never enjoying a raise or never upgrading anything, ever. It means deciding on purpose how much of each raise gets absorbed and how much keeps compounding, instead of letting the answer default to all of it, one recurring charge at a time. And your timeline actually works in your favor here. more than you might expect. Retiring at 59 puts you only about 6 months away from 59 and a half. Practically no bridge to plan for at all. A modest cash cushion covers a gap that's small on its own. And if you want extra room, there's the rule of 55. Leave your current employer in or after the year you turn 55, and that specific 401k becomes penalty free to withdraw from immediately. No waiting required. This one was never really about whether $75,000 is a big enough salary. It's about whether the number you set today is still the number running 5 raises from now. That's the version that asks the least of you. If it's not fast enough, the next one aims at the exact same destination, just considerably harder. Traditional fire gets its name because it's the original recipe, the baseline formula. The entire fire movement is actually built around before variations like lean, fat, coast, or barista came along. Every other version of this idea is really just traditional fire, adjusted up or down. Here's the roadmap in one line. This version takes you from spending $34,000 a year right now to retiring at 51 with that same $1,200,000 Slow Fire was aiming for. Same destination as Slow Fire, a considerably faster pace to get there. Same first question as before. What do you want your retirement to actually look like? This time, let's keep it at that same $48,000 figure Slow Fire used. So using the same formula, $48,000 times 25, you're aiming at the exact same $1,200,000. The only thing that changes here is how hard you push the dial, starting right now. Second question, what would you need to spend now to get there faster? Instead of spending close to that $48,800 national average, you bring it down to $34,000 a year, meaningfully below the average by choice, not by circumstance. Rent that's fine, not fancy. A car that's paid off, not upgraded. Cooking most nights instead of ordering. That frees up $27,592 a year to invest roughly double what Slow Fire asked of you. In practice, that $27,592 fits entirely inside a maxed Roth IRA plus a 401k that's still well under its $24,500 limit for the year, meaning every dollar of it can stay in tax-advantaged accounts with room to spare. Here's what's worth sitting with for a second. Investing about double the amount doesn't cut your timeline in half. It drops from about 29 years down to about 21. Real progress, genuinely faster, but not simple division. Money invested earlier has more time to compound. So pushing harder now buys you back years faster than the raw percentages would suggest, without ever cutting the weight exactly in half. 21 years from 30 puts you retiring at 51, 8 years earlier than Slow Fire, at the exact same destination. You just get there considerably faster because you're asking more of the years in between. Here's what quietly sabotaged this one for a lot of people, and it rarely looks like sabotage in the moment. Your phone gets upgraded because the old one feels slow. A rideshare replaces the bus because it's raining. A second streaming service gets added because everyone's talking about one show. None of these feel like a financial event, but every one of those dollars was supposed to be closing your gap toward $1,200,000. Instead, it quietly widens that gap, not by moving the target itself, but by shrinking how much actually reaches the market each year. Here's what that actually looks like in dollars. If those small upgrades add up to you spending $38,000 a year instead of $34,000, still not a dramatic lifestyle, just $4,000 a quiet creep. Your timeline stretches from about 21 years to well past 22. Almost 2 extra years for $4,000 a year that never felt like a single decision. None of this means 21 years of deprivation. It means that on this path, more of your paycheck is already earmarked. So the gap between a comfortable life and a slowly expanding one matters more here than it would under Slow Fire. What makes this path appealing is how little else it requires from you. No company to build, no tenants to manage, no packing up your life and moving somewhere new. The hidden cost is holding real discipline steady for 2 decades on top of hoping the market behaves. And because none of your investing naturally spills into a taxable account, you need to deliberately build an accessible bridge before retiring. A Roth conversion ladder can provide money later, but it doesn't cover its own initial 5-year wait. That first stretch would need to come from Roth IRA, contributions, cash, taxable investments, or some mix of the three. Retiring at 51 creates a bigger account timing problem for you than slow fires about 8.5 years before 59.5. A genuine gap to bridge. This is exactly the situation a tool called the Roth conversion ladder was built for. We'll walk through exactly how that works in a moment. For now, the key point is that it takes planning years in advance, which is why starting to think about it early matters as much as the saving itself. That's the same destination reached under real pressure. The next version doesn't just push harder, it changes where your finish line even sits. Lean Fire gets its name from the spending level, not the timeline. Lean describes a stripped down budget, in contrast to what's called Fat Fire, the expensive lifestyle version of the same idea, which isn't covered here. This is the version where the spending itself gets cut, not just the pace. Here's the roadmap in one line. This version takes you from spending $24,000 a year right now, the same $24,000 you live on in retirement to retiring at 41 with $600,000. Same first question, but this time the answer itself changes. Instead of building toward that comfortable $48,000 retirement, slow and traditional fire, we're both aiming at you're targeting $24,000 a year, about half of that national average, by choice, and living on that same $24,000 right now while you're still working and saving toward it. That's the core idea underneath Lean Fire. You're not waiting to arrive at the lean lifestyle someday. You start living it today. Using the same formula, $24,000 a year times 25, that comes out to $600,000. $600,000 below the number both slow and traditional fire we're aiming for. Second question, what's left to invest? Put nearly all the rest of your take-home pay to work. $61,600 coming in minus $24,000 spent leaves $37,592 a year to invest, almost exactly half of your $75,000 salary. In practice, that $37,592 doesn't fit inside tax advantage accounts alone. A max Roth IRA and a max 401k together only hold $32,000 for the year, which means roughly $5,600 has to go straight into a taxable brokerage account regardless of preference, which turns out to work in your favor, since that's exactly the kind of account this strategy needs anyway to help bridge the gap ahead. At that pace, $600,000 arrives in about 11 years. You retire at 41. 11 years is remarkable. Let's be clear about what it actually demands of you, though. Living on $24,000 a year, about half the national average for a single person, while earning $75,000 for over a decade straight, isn't a lifestyle most people slide into by accident. Probably a shared living situation, almost certainly no car payment. Subscriptions cut down to maybe one instead of the 5 or 6 that quietly stack up on a normal budget. A grocery total that gets tracked, not estimated. Here's what that actually breaks down to month by month. $24,000 a year is $2,000 a month. A shared rent situation might run $900. Groceries kept simple around $300. No car payment but insurance and the basics of getting around, maybe $150. Health insurance and renter's insurance together, around $300. Phone and utilities, another $150. That leaves right around $200 a month for absolutely everything else. One subscription, the rare meal out, a birthday gift, not zero room, just very little of it. Here's an important distinction before this sounds either heroic or miserable. If you genuinely prefer a quiet, low-clutter life, you're not sacrificing much by living this way. It was already close to what you wanted. If you're gritting your teeth through over a decade of a life you resent, purely because you resent your job even more, you're paying a very different kind of price for the exact same number. Both land on $600,000 in the same 11 years. Only one of you walks away from it actually feeling free. This was never really about whether $24,000 a year is a virtuous number to live on. It's about whether that budget leaves you any room for what doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. A car that needs a new transmission, a parent who suddenly needs help, a landlord who raises the rent faster than planned. When your spending is already cut to the floor, there's nothing left to absorb a surprise. The advantage here is speed. 18 years earlier than slow fire, 10 years earlier than traditional. The hidden cost is that your $24,000 number doesn't loosen once work stops. It was never built to. Your retirement target itself assumes you stay at that spending level permanently, which is exactly why this is the hardest of the three. There's a second hidden cost worth naming too. The 4% framework this target is built on was originally tested against roughly 30-year retirements. Retiring at 41 likely means needing this money to last considerably longer than that, which is exactly why many people pursuing lean fire plan around a more conservative withdrawal rate than 4%, rather than the simplified number used here. Retiring at 41 means bridging roughly 18 and a half years before 59 and a half, by far the widest gap of the three, and the one where getting your account structure right matters most. This path needs the most deliberate mix of the three. First, a taxable brokerage balance built up year after year before you quit. Second, aggressive use of Roth IRA contributions, since those can be pulled back out anytime. And very likely a third piece, a Roth conversion ladder already running for years before you even need that bridge. This is the version where an account mistake doesn't just cost you a little in penalties. It can mean going back to work. Before putting these three side by side, here's the honest part. Most videos like this one skip entirely. $75,000 is not automatically too small an income for any of this. It also doesn't make any of it easy. This tends to work when you avoid an expensive city, keep consumer debt out of the picture, invest consistently, and don't let every raise quietly turn into a bigger apartment. It gets a lot harder if you're supporting several dependents, started investing late, are carrying existing debt, or want a retirement that costs more than these numbers assume. Here's the second thing almost nobody mentions. Look back at those three retirement ages, 59, 51, 41. Every single one of them lands before 59 and a half, which is the age the IRS treats as the line for penalty-free withdrawals from a traditional 401k or IRA. Though slow fire falls short of that line by only about 6 months. Pull money out of one of those accounts before that age, and on top of ordinary income tax, there's a 10% penalty stacked on top, which means hitting your target number isn't actually the finish line if all of it is sitting in the wrong kind of account. There are a few real ways around this, and people in your exact situation lean on them constantly. 1. Keep a portion of your investing happening in an ordinary taxable brokerage account instead of only a 401k or IRA. There's no age restriction on that money at all, and it exists specifically to bridge the years between quitting and 59 and a half. 2. Money you contribute directly into a Roth IRA, not the growth on it, just what you actually put in, can be withdrawn at any time, tax and penalty free, which is exactly why a lot of people prioritize maxing a Roth IRA even while chasing an early number. 3. If most of your savings end up sitting in a traditional account, there's a tool called a Roth conversion ladder. Here's how it works. Each year, you convert a planned slice of that money into a Roth IRA, and that converted amount generally counts as taxable income the year you convert it. So there's a real tax bill attached, not a free move. Each conversion then has its own 5-year waiting period. Once that period passes, that specific converted amount can generally be withdrawn penalty free. None of this changes the simplified target numbers used for this comparison, but taxes and account access can affect what a real person ultimately needs. It changes where your money actually needs to sit for any of these three ages to be real for you. Same salary the entire way through. Three very different bills. Slow fire barely change anything about how you live. Spending the actual national average for a single person, an automatic $13,600 contribution. The exact same lifestyle before and after. And the price was simply time. 29 years, retiring at 59. Traditional fire aimed at that exact same $1,200,000 retirement, but pushed your current spending down to $34,000 a year, meaningfully below that average to get there faster. The price was real, sustained discipline for about 21 years, retiring at 51. Lean fire didn't just push harder. It changed your destination itself down to $24,000 a year, about half the national average starting immediately. The price was the toughest daily life of the three, sustained for over a decade and never really loosening, but it also arrived the fastest. 11 years, retiring at 41. None of these three were free. Every one of them charged you something: years, discipline, or a permanently smaller life. Your salary never moved once. Only what you were willing to hand over did. Before settling which of these three is actually right for you, here's a question worth asking honestly. Right for what? Retiring from a job isn't the same as retiring to something. Being financially independent doesn't mean you have to stop working entirely. You might still start a company, take on lighter work, write, consult, build something new. The real shift isn't that work disappears. It's that work stops controlling every decision because missing a paycheck no longer threatens your whole plan. Worth being honest, though, hitting the number doesn't automatically create a good life on the other side of it. A job gives you more than income: structure, community, a sense of progress, sometimes identity itself. If you reach financial independence without a plan for what replaces those things, you can end up dealing with boredom, a loss of purpose, even isolation, despite doing everything right financially. A strong plan really needs two parts: one for leaving work and one for what actually comes after it, which is really what should decide between these three for you. If you mainly want balance and breathing room, slow fire probably fits you best. If you're determined to leave a demanding career as soon as possible, traditional fire's discipline might be worth it to you. If you genuinely value time over almost everything else, with something specific already waiting on the other side, Lean Fire was built for you. The real question was never simply whether $75,000 is enough. It's how much of today you're willing to trade and for how long to reach a version of tomorrow that's actually yours, one you actually have a plan for living in. Go back to that person from the start of this video, out on a Thursday afternoon, walking a dog through the park in the middle of what should have been someone's work day. They didn't need a rare income to get there. Just a paycheck like yours, maybe $75,000 a year, and a decision about which of these three they were actually willing to live with, long enough for the math to finish doing its job. If you're earning something close to $75,000 right now, which of these three would you actually choose? And more importantly, which one would you never really be able to stick with? Tell me down in the comments.